cold November wind cut through the busy streets of Chicago like a sharp knife. People walked quickly with their heads down, trying to escape the bitter cold that seemed to go right through their clothes. The streetlights had just come on. Making long shadows on the wet sidewalk, Harold Richardson pulled his expensive black coat tighter around his body as he walked down the familiar street. At 79 years old, he moved a bit slower than he used to, but his back was still straight and his eyes were still bright. His gray hair was perfectly combed, and his gold watch caught the light from the street lamps. Anyone looking at him could tell he had money. His shoes were leather and shiny, his coat was made from the finest wool, and everything about him said success. But Harold was not thinking about his money or his big house in the rich part of town. He was thinking about the past. Today marked exactly 55 years since he had opened his first small grocery store on this very street. Back then, he was just a young man with big dreams and very little money. He had worked 18 hours, a day, 7 days a week, to make that little store successful. Now he owned 12 stores across 3 states. He had more money than he could spend in his lifetime. But sometimes, especially on days like today, he missed the simple times when he knew everyone in the neighborhood, and they all knew him. Harold stopped in front of Tony's Pizza. The small shop had been there for as long as he could remember. The neon sign buzzed and flickered, and the windows were foggy from the heat inside. He could smell the pizza through the door: cheese, tomato sauce, and fresh bread. It was the same smell he remembered from when he was young and poor. He pushed open the heavy glass door, and a wave of warm air hit his face. The bell above the door rang, announcing his arrival. The inside of the shop was small and cramped, with just 4 tables and a long counter where the pizzas were displayed under bright lights. The walls were covered with old photos of the neighborhood and yellowed newspaper articles about local sports teams. Behind the counter stood Tony Jr., the son of the original owner. He was a tired-looking man in his 40s with flour on his apron and sweat on his forehead. Harold had known Tony Jr. since he was a little boy running around his father's pizza shop. "Mr. Richardson," Tony Jr. said with surprise and pleasure. "I haven't seen you in months. How are you doing?" "I'm doing well, Tony," Harold replied with a warm smile. "Just thought I'd come by and get a slice like the old days." As Harold looked around the familiar shop, his eyes fell on a young girl standing near the counter. She looked to be about 16 or 17 years old. Long brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a thin blue jacket that had seen better days. Her jeans had small holes in them, and her white sneakers were old and dirty. The girl was holding something in her hands, and Harold could see that she was counting money. Her fingers were red from the cold, and she kept looking up at the menu board above the counter with worried eyes. She counted the bills and coins once, then again, then a third time. Each time she counted, her face looked more disappointed. Harold noticed that other customers came and went while the girl just stood there. She seemed to be trying to work up the courage to order something. Her thin jacket made Harold think she must be very cold. Chicago winters were hard on everyone, but they were especially hard on people who didn't have warm clothes. The girl finally walked up to the counter. Her voice was so quiet that Harold had to step closer to hear what she was saying. "Excuse me," she said to Tony Jr. "How much is a large pepperoni pizza?" Tony Jr. looked at the young girl with kind eyes. He had seen many kids like her over the years, kids who didn't have much money but were still trying to get a good meal. "A large pepperoni is $12.50, he said gently. The girl looked down at the money in her hands again. Harold could see that she had several crumpled $1 bills and a handful of coins. She counted it all one more time, moving her lips silently as she added up the amounts. "What about a medium?" she asked hopefully. $10, Tony Jr. replied. The girl's shoulders dropped a little. She counted her money again, but Harold could tell from her expression that she didn't have enough. She stood there for a long moment, just staring at the money in her hands. Harold watched this scene and felt his heart begin to ache. The girl reminded him of himself when he was young. He remembered standing in this very same pizza shop 50 years ago, counting his own pennies and hoping he had enough for just one slice. He remembered the feeling of being hungry but not having enough money to buy food. "Could I get just 2 slices?" the girl asked, her voice even quieter than before. Tony Jr. looked uncomfortable. 2 slices would be $4, he said. The girl counted her money one final time. Harold could see her lips moving as she added up the coins. She finished counting. She looked up at Tony Jr., with tears starting to form in her eyes. "I only have $3.57, she said, her voice breaking a little. "Could I get just 1 slice?" Tony Jr.'s face showed that he felt sorry for her. "1 slice is $2.50, he said softly. The girl nodded quickly and started to put her money on the counter. But as she did, some of the coins fell to the floor. She quickly bent down to pick them up, trying to hide the fact that she was starting to cry. Harold couldn't watch anymore. He had seen enough pain in his 79 years to know real need when he saw it. This girl wasn't just hungry, she was desperate. And something about her reminded him not just of himself, but of other people he had known and helped over the years. As the girl stood up with the coins she had dropped, Harold made a decision. He stepped forward to the counter right next to where she was standing. The girl looked up at him with surprise. She quickly wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to hide the fact that she had been crying. Harold could see that she was embarrassed to be seen in this situation. "Excuse me," Harold said to Tony Jr., but he was looking at the girl. "I'd like to pay for this young lady's pizza. Make it a large pepperoni, just like she wanted." The girl's eyes grew wide with shock. She looked up at Harold, taking in his expensive clothes and kind face. For a moment, she couldn't speak at all.
"Oh, no, sir,"
she finally said, shaking her head quickly. "I can't let you do that. I don't need charity. I can pay for my own food." Harold smiled at her gently. He understood her pride. He had felt the same way when he was young and poor. "It's not charity," he said kindly. "Think of it as a loan. You can pay me back someday when you're able to." The girl stood there, clearly torn between her pride and her hunger. Harold could see the battle going on in her mind. She wanted the pizza badly, but she didn't want to accept help from a stranger. Tony Jr. watched this scene with interest. He had seen Harold help people before over the years. The old man had a reputation for kindness in the neighborhood. "Also take a small cheese pizza for myself," Harold added, pulling out his wallet. "And Tony, give her whatever she wants on that pizza." The girl looked back and forth between Harold and Tony Jr. Her empty stomach was making the decision for her, even though her pride was telling her to refuse. "I don't even know your name," she said to Harold. "My name is Harold Richardson," he replied with a warm smile. "And you don't need to know anything else about me except that I remember what it's like to be young and hungry." The girl finally nodded, accepting his help. "My name is Emma," she said quietly. "Emma Martinez. And thank you, Mr. Richardson. I promise I'll pay you back someday." Harold's heart warmed at her words. "I'm sure you will, Emma. I'm sure you will." Tony Jr. smiled as he watched Harold and Emma. He had seen many acts of kindness in his pizza shop over the years, but something about this moment felt special. He could tell that both people standing at his counter were good people who had just found each other at the right time. "What toppings would you like on your large pizza, miss?" Tony Jr. asked Emma kindly. Emma looked up at the menu board, then back at Harold. She still seemed uncomfortable about accepting help from a stranger. "Just pepperoni is fine," she said quietly. "I don't want to cost too much." Harold shook his head with a gentle smile. "Emma, please order whatever you want. How about some vegetables too? You look like you could use a good, healthy meal." Emma's stomach growled loudly at that moment, and her face turned red with embarrassment. She hadn't eaten anything since yesterday morning, and her body was reminding her how hungry she was. "Could I maybe get pepperoni and mushrooms?" she asked. Hesitantly, of course, Harold said. "Tony, make it pepperoni, mushrooms, and add some green peppers too. Growing kids need their vegetables." Tony Jr. nodded and started preparing the pizzas. The ovens were hot, and the smell of baking bread and melting cheese filled the small shop. Emma found herself breathing in the wonderful smells. And for the first time that day, she felt a little bit of hope. Harold paid for both pizzas and left a generous tip for Tony Jr. Then he turned to Emma. "Would you like to sit and eat here? Or do you need to take your pizza somewhere else?" Emma looked toward the small tables in the corner of the shop. The idea of sitting in the warm restaurant was very appealing. Outside, the wind was getting stronger and snow had started to fall. "Could we sit here?" she asked. "I don't really have anywhere else to go right now, of course," Harold replied. He gestured toward a table by the window. "Let's sit over there, where we can watch the snow fall." They sat down, across from each other at the small table. Harold folded his hands and looked at Emma with curious, kind eyes. He could tell she was nervous about sitting with him. She kept looking around the restaurant as if she was worried about something. "Are you okay?" Harold asked gently. "You seem worried about something." Emma bit her lip and looked down at her hands. I'm not used to accepting help from people I don't know. My mom always taught me to be careful around strangers." Harold nodded with understanding. "Your mother is smart to teach you that. The world can be a dangerous place, especially for young people. But sometimes, Emma, we meet people who genuinely want to help. I promise you that I'm one of those people." Tony Jr. brought their pizzas to the table. Emma's large pizza looked amazing with the cheese bubbling and the pepperoni and vegetables perfectly cooked. Harold's small cheese pizza looked good too, but he seemed more interested in watching Emma's reaction to her food. Emma took her first bite and closed her eyes with pleasure. The pizza was hot and delicious, and it was the first real food she had eaten in over 24 hours. She tried to eat slowly and politely, but Harold could tell she was very hungry. "When was the last time you ate?" Harold asked gently. Emma swallowed her bite of pizza and looked embarrassed. "Yesterday morning, I had a piece of toast before school." Harold felt his heart break a little. "What about lunch at school?" "Don't." "They have a lunch program?" "They do," Emma said quietly. "But I'm not eligible for free lunch because my mom makes just a little too much money, and I can't afford to buy lunch every day. Usually I just drink water and tell people I'm not hungry." Harold was quiet for a moment, thinking about what Emma had just told him. He remembered his own school days when he sometimes went without lunch because his family couldn't afford it. But that was over 60 years ago. He was sad to learn that. Kids still face the same problems today. "What about your mother?" Harold asked. "Is she at work now?" Emma nodded while taking another bite of pizza. She's a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. "She's working a double shift today, which means she won't be home until tomorrow morning. She's been working extra hours to help pay for my college applications." "College applications?" Harold repeated with interest. "So you're a senior in high school?" "Yes, sir," Emma said, her face brightening a little. "I have good grades, and I've been accepted to 2 universities already. But even with scholarships, college is very expensive. Mom and I are trying to save every penny we can." Harold was impressed. Despite her difficult situation, this young woman was working toward a better future. "What do you want to study in college?" "I want to be a teacher," Emma said. And for the first time since Harold had met her, she smiled a real, genuine smile. "I want to teach elementary school kids. I love working with children, and I want to help kids who come from families like mine, families that don't have a lot of money but have big dreams." Harold felt a warm feeling in his chest. This girl reminded him so much of his late wife, Margaret. Margaret had also wanted to help people, and she had spent her career teaching children from poor families. "That's a wonderful goal," Harold said sincerely. "The world needs more teachers who understand what it's like to struggle. You'll be able to connect with your students in a way that other teachers might not." Emma nodded enthusiastically. "That's exactly what I think. I know what it feels like to be the kid who can't afford new school supplies or who doesn't have lunch money. I want to be the teacher who makes sure no kid feels left out or ashamed because their family doesn't have much money." As they continued eating, Harold found himself more and more impressed with Emma. She was mature, thoughtful, and determined. Despite her difficult circumstances, she wasn't bitter or angry. Instead, she wanted to use her experiences to help other people. "Do you have a job?" Harold asked. "I work at Murphy's grocery store on weekends and after school," Emma said. "It's not a lot of hours, but every little bit helps. I save most of my money for college, but sometimes I have to use it for things like bus fare or food when Mom's working late shifts." Harold knew Murphy's grocery store. It was a small, family-owned store in a rough part of town. The work there would be hard, and the pay wouldn't be very good. But he admired Emma for working hard to help her family and save for her future. "How did you end up here tonight?" Harold asked. "Were you walking home from work?" Emma looked a little embarrassed again. "I was supposed to have dinner at my friend Sarah's house, but her little brother got sick, and her mom had to take him to the emergency room. Sarah texted me not to come over, but I was already on my way there. I didn't want to go home to an empty house, so I decided to get some food and maybe do homework here where it's warm and bright." Harold looked out the window at the falling snow. The weather was getting worse, and he could see people hurrying down the sidewalk with their heads down against the wind. "How were you planning to get home?" he asked with concern. "I was going to take the bus," Emma said. "But now I don't have enough money left for bus fare. I guess I'll have to walk." Harold shook his head firmly. "Absolutely not. It's too cold and dangerous for you to walk home in this weather. I'll drive you home after we finish eating." Emma started to protest, but Harold held up his hand. "Emma, I'm not taking no for an answer. A young woman shouldn't be walking alone in this neighborhood at night, especially not in a snowstorm." Emma looked at Harold carefully, studying his face. She could see that he was genuinely concerned about her safety, not trying to take advantage of her. Something about his kind eyes and gentle manner made her trust him. "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you, Mr. Richardson. You're being very kind to me." Harold smiled. "Emma, helping you tonight is the most meaningful thing I've done in a long time. Thank you for letting me help." As they continued eating their pizza, the snow outside grew heavier. The big flakes stuck to the window, creating patterns that looked like lace. The warm light inside Tony's Pizza made the small restaurant feel cozy and safe, like a shelter. From the cold world outside, Harold watched Emma eat with genuine pleasure. It had been a long time since he had seen someone enjoy a simple meal so much. It reminded him of his own childhood, when a hot meal was something special, not something to take for granted. "Tell me more about your mother," Harold said, settling. Back in his chair, "She sounds like a remarkable woman." Emma's face lit up with pride and love. "She's amazing. She came to Chicago when I was just 3 years old. My father left us when I was 2, and Mom decided to start over somewhere new. She didn't know anyone here, and she didn't have any family to help her." Harold listened carefully, impressed by the strength it must have taken for a young single mother to start over in a new city with a small child. "Mom worked 2 jobs while she went to nursing school," Emma continued. "During the day, she cleaned offices. At night, she worked at a diner. She studied whenever she could during her breaks, after I went to bed, early in the morning before I woke up. It took her 6 years to finish nursing school because she could only take a few classes at a time." "That's incredible," Harold said, with genuine admiration. "How did she manage to take care of you while working so much?" "Sometimes she had to take me to work with her," Emma said with a small laugh. "I spent a lot of evenings at that diner, doing my homework at a corner table. While Mom served customers, the other waitresses would help watch me, and the cook always made sure I had something to eat." Harold felt a deep respect for Emma's mother. He had known many hard-working people in his life, but raising a child alone while working multiple jobs and going to school required a special kind of strength. "When did she become a full-time nurse?" Harold asked. "About 5 years ago," Emma replied. "It was the happiest day of our lives when she got her first real nursing job at St. Mary's Hospital. We celebrated by going to McDonald's. It was the first time we had eaten at a restaurant in months." Harold smiled at the image of Emma and her mother celebrating such an important milestone with a simple meal at McDonald's. It showed him how much they appreciated the small victories in life. "Mom always tells me that education is the only thing that can change our lives," Emma said. "Seriously. She says that's why she sacrificed so much to become a nurse. And that's why she's working extra shifts now to help pay for my college." "Your mother is absolutely right," Harold agreed. "Education opens doors that nothing else can open. I didn't go to college myself. I couldn't afford it when I was young. But I learned everything I could about business, and I read every book I could get my hands on." Emma looked surprised. "You didn't go to college, but you're so successful?" Harold chuckled. "Success can come in many different ways, Emma. College is wonderful if you can afford it. I think it will be perfect for you, since you want to be a teacher. But what matters most is never stopping learning, no matter how old you get." "How did you become successful?" Emma asked curiously. "What kind of business do you do?" Harold leaned forward, happy to share his story. I started with one small grocery store when I was 24 years old. I had saved every penny I could for 5 years, and I borrowed money from 3 different banks to buy that little store. Emma listened with fascination as Harold told her about his early days as a business owner. The store was in a rough neighborhood, just like where you work now, Harold continued. Many of my customers didn't have much money, just like I didn't have much money when I started. I learned to treat everyone with respect, no matter how little they could afford to spend. What made your store successful? Emma asked. I cared about my customers, Harold said simply. When people couldn't afford to pay for their groceries, I let them pay me back later. When kids came in hungry after school, I made sure they got something to eat, even if they didn't have money. When elderly people needed help carrying their groceries home, I or one of my employees would walk with them. Emma was amazed. Weren't you worried about losing money? Sometimes I did lose money, Harold admitted. Some people never paid me back, but most people did. The customers who felt cared for became loyal customers who shopped at my store for years. They also told their friends and family to shop there too. Harold explained how his small store had grown into a chain of 12 stores across 3 states. He had always maintained the same philosophy: treat people well, care about your community, and success will follow. I retired 10 years ago, Harold said. Now I spend my time reading, traveling a little, and looking for ways to help people in my community. Emma was quiet for a moment, thinking about Harold's story. Then she asked, "Don't you have a family? Children or grandchildren?" A sad look crossed Harold's face. My wife Margaret and I were married for 45 years. She died 3 years ago from cancer. We always wanted children, but we were never able to have any. Margaret used to say that all the children she taught were like our children. She was a teacher too, Emma asked with excitement. Yes, Harold said, his face brightening again. She taught 3rd grade for 30 years. She loved those kids so much, and they loved her too. Even after she retired, former students would come to visit her. At her funeral, dozens of people came who had been her students 20 or 30 years ago. Emma felt tears forming in her eyes. She sounds like she was a wonderful person. She was, Harold said softly. And you know what? You remind me of her. You have the same kind heart, the same desire to help other people Margaret would have. Loved you. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both thinking about the stories they had shared. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and the few people walking by moved quickly to get out of the cold. "Mr. Richardson," Emma said finally, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you help me tonight? You don't know me, and you don't owe me anything. Why would you spend your money on a stranger?" Harold thought about her question for a moment before answering. "Emma, when I saw you counting your money at the counter, I saw myself 55 years ago. I remembered what it felt like to be hungry and not have enough money for food. I remembered the shame and embarrassment of not being able to afford something as simple as a slice of pizza." He paused, looking out at the snowy street. "But there's more to it than that. Since Margaret died, I've been lonely. I have more money than I can spend, but I don't have anyone to share my life with. Tonight, sitting here with you, listening to your dreams and your mother's story, I feel more alive than I have in months." Emma reached across the table and touched Harold's hand gently. "I'm glad we met, Mr. Richardson. This has been the best evening I've had in a long time." Harold squeezed her hand gently. "Mine too, Emma, mine too." As they finished their pizza, both Harold and Emma felt that something special had happened between them. They had started as strangers, but they were ending the evening as friends. Neither of them knew that their connection ran much deeper than they realized, and that the biggest surprise of the night was still to come. As Harold and Emma prepared to leave Tony's Pizza, Emma started talking about her neighborhood. She wanted Harold to know where she lived so he could drive her home safely. "I live in the Riverside Apartments," Emma said, putting on her thin jacket. "It's about 10 minutes from here on Oak Street. Do you know where that is?" Harold stopped putting on his coat. The name Riverside Apartments hit him like a lightning bolt. He knew those apartments very well. In fact, he knew them better than almost any other place in Chicago. "Riverside Apartments," he repeated slowly. The big brick building with the corner store on the first floor? Yes, that's right, Emma said, surprised that he knew the building. Well, there used to be a corner store there. It's been empty for years now. But Mom always talks about the grocery store that used to be there when I was little. Harold's heart started beating faster. He felt like the world was spinning around him. Could this really be possible? Could Emma be living in the same building where he had run his very first store? Emma, Harold said carefully, what was your address when you were very young? Do you remember? Emma looked puzzled by the question, but she answered anyway. We've lived in the same apartment my whole life. Apartment 3B at 412 Oak Street. Why do you ask? Harold had to sit back down. His legs suddenly felt weak, and his hands were shaking. 412 Oak Street, apartment 3B. He remembered that address. He remembered it very well. Are you okay, Mr. Richardson? Emma asked with concern. You look like you've seen a ghost. Harold looked up at Emma with wide eyes. What's your mother's name? Her full name? Sarah Martinez, Emma replied, getting more worried about Harold's strange behavior. But her name used to be Sarah Johnson before she got married to my father. Mr. Richardson, you're scaring me. What's wrong? Harold felt tears forming in his eyes. Sarah Johnson. He remembered that name perfectly. Remembered a young woman with brown hair and tired eyes who used to come into his store with a little girl. He remembered helping that family during some of their hardest times. Emma, Harold said in a whisper, I think I knew your mother. In fact, I'm sure I knew your mother. Emma stared at him in confusion. What do you mean you knew my mother? Is that possible? Harold took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. Emma, I owned that grocery store in your building. Richardson's Grocery was my store. I ran it from 1995 to 2003. Your mother was one of my customers. Emma's mouth fell open in shock. She stared at Harold as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. You're Harold Richardson? The Harold Richardson? You know who I am? Harold asked, surprised. Know who you are? Emma said, her voice getting louder with excitement. Mr. Richardson, my mother has been looking for you for 20 years. She talks about you all the time. She calls you her guardian angel. Now it was Harold's turn to be shocked. She talks about me? Emma nodded enthusiastically, tears starting to form in her eyes. She tells me stories about you all the time. She says you were the kindest man she ever met. She says you saved our lives. Harold felt overwhelmed with emotion. I remember your mother very well now. She was so young, probably about the same age you are now. She worked 2 jobs and was trying to take care of you all by herself. Yes, Emma said excitedly. And you helped us so many times. Mom says you let her pay for groceries later when she didn't have money. Shay says you gave me snacks when I came to the store with her. She says you even helped her pay rent once when she was going to be evicted. Harold nodded, the memories flooding back to him. I remember now. You were maybe 3 or 4 years old. You used to help me put cans on the lower shelves, and you always asked for animal crackers. Emma started crying with joy. I remember helping in the store. I remember the nice man who always gave me crackers and let me help him work. Both Harold and Emma were crying now, overwhelmed by the incredible coincidence that had brought them together again after so many years. Emma, Harold said through his tears, your mother was one of the bravest people I ever met. She was working so hard to build a better life for you both. I was going through a difficult time in my own life then. My business was struggling, and I had just lost my father. Helping your family reminded me why I went into business in the first place. Wiped her eyes with her sleeve. Mom always said you were going through a hard time too, but you still helped us. She said that made your kindness even more special. Harold reached across the table and took Emma's hands in his. Emma, I need to tell you something. I've sold that store and moved my business to other locations. I always wondered what happened to your family. I hoped your mother had been able to finish nursing school. Hoped you had grown up healthy and happy. I never forgot about you both. And we never forgot about you, Emma said. Mom has been trying to find you for years. She wanted to thank you properly and show you how well we turned out because of your help. Harold shook his head in amazement. I can't believe this is happening. Of all the pizza shops in Chicago, Of all the nights you could have been here, of all the times I could have decided to visit this place, we found each other again. Emma squeezed Harold's hands. Mom always said that good people find each other when they're supposed to. She said the universe has a way of bringing the right people together at the right time. Tony Jr. had been watching this emotional scene. From behind the counter, he came over to their table with a box of tissues and a gentle smile. "I don't know what's happening here," Tony Jr. said kindly, "but it looks like something pretty special." Harold and Emma both laughed through their tears. "Tony," Harold said, "this young lady and I knew each other 20 years ago, and we just figured it out." Tony Jr. shook his head in wonder. "That's incredible. What are the chances?" "I need to call my mother," Emma said suddenly. "She's not going to believe this. She's at work, but I know she'll want to talk to you right away." Harold nodded eagerly. "I would love to talk to your mother. I have so many questions about how her life turned out." Emma pulled out an old cell phone and dialed her mother's number. Harold could hear it ringing, and then a tired voice answered. "Mom," Emma said, trying to control her excitement, "I know you're at work, but something incredible has happened. I'm sitting here with Harold Richardson." There was a long pause on the other end of the phone. Then Harold heard a woman's voice say, "Emma, what did you just say?" "Harold Richardson, Mom. The Harold Richardson from the grocery store? I found him, or he found me. We're together right now." Harold could hear Sarah crying on the other end. "Of the phone? Put him on," she said through her tears. "Please, let me talk to him." Emma handed the phone to Harold with shaking hands. He took it and held it to his ear. "Sarah," said gently. "Harold," came the tearful voice on the other end. "Is it really you? It's really me, Sarah? And I can't believe I'm talking to you after all these years." The phone call between Harold and Sarah lasted for nearly 20 minutes. Harold listened as Sarah told him about her life over the past 20 years. She had finished nursing school, just as she had dreamed. She had worked hard to provide for. Iman had never remarried, choosing instead to focus all her energy on being the best mother she could be. "Harold," Sarah said through her tears, "I have thought about you every single day for 20 years. You saved our lives. Without your help, I never would have been able to finish nursing school. Emma and I would still be struggling just to survive." Harold felt overwhelmed with emotion. "Sarah, you don't understand. You and Emma saved my life too. I was at the lowest point in my business when I met you. I was wondering if I was really making a difference in the world. Helping your family reminded me why I started my business in the first place." After they finished talking, Harold handed the phone back to Emma. Sarah spoke to her daughter for a few more minutes, telling her how incredible this moment was for her. When Emma hung up the phone, both she and Harold sat in silence for a moment, still trying to process what had happened. "She's going to try to get someone to cover the rest of her shift," Emma said. "She wants to come here and see you tonight if possible." Harold nodded eagerly. "I would love to see her again. But Emma, before she gets here, I want to talk to you about something important." Emma looked at him curiously.
"What is it?"
Harold took a deep breath. "Emma, you told me earlier that you're worried about paying for college, even with scholarships. You told me that you and your mother are working extra hard to save money for your education." "Yes," Emma said quietly. "College is very expensive, even with the scholarships I've received. We're doing our best, but it's going to be difficult." Harold reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. From it, he took a business card and handed it to Emma. "I want you to have this. It's the card for my lawyer. His name is David Chen, and he handles all of my personal business." Emma looked at the card, confused. "I don't understand. Why are you giving me this?" "Emma," Harold said seriously, "I want to pay for your college education. All of it. Tuition, books, room and board, everything you need." Emma's eyes grew wide with shock. She started shaking her head immediately. "No, Mr. Richardson, I can't accept that. It's too much. I could never pay you back." Harold held up his hand to stop her protests. "Emma, listen to me. I'm 79 years old. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. My wife and I were never able to have children, so we don't have anyone to leave our money to." Emma continued to shake her head. "But Mr. Richardson, paying for college costs tens of thousands of dollars. I can't let you spend that much money on me. Emma, Harold said gently, do you remember what I told you about why I helped your family 20 years ago? Emma nodded, said we reminded you why you went into business in the first place. That's right. And tonight meeting you again. Seeing what a wonderful young woman you've become? Hearing about your dreams to help other children? You're reminding me again why I worked so hard all these years. Harold leaned forward and looked directly into Emma's eyes. Emma, I don't have children or grandchildren to be proud of. But tonight, sitting here with you, I feel like a proud grandfather. Your success will be my legacy. Emma started crying again. Mr. Richardson, I don't know what to say. This is too generous. How can I ever repay you? You can repay me by becoming the best teacher you can be, Harold said firmly. You can repay me by helping other children the way I was able to help your family. You can repay me by passing on the kindness and making the world a better place. Emma buried her face in her hands and cried. She was overwhelmed by Harold's generosity and by the incredible way her life had just changed in one evening. There's one more thing, Harold said softly. I don't want you and your mother to worry about money anymore. I know your mother is working double shifts to help pay for your college. I want her to be able to work normal hours and spend more time with you during your last year of high school. Emma looked up at him through her tears. What do you mean? I want to set up a fund that will help cover your family's living expenses while you finish high school and go through college. Your mother has worked hard enough. She deserves to have some security and peace of mind. Emma was completely speechless. She couldn't believe that her life had changed so dramatically in just one evening. A few hours ago, she had been a hungry teenager who couldn't afford a pizza. Now, her entire future was being transformed by the kindness of a man she had known. As a small child, Mr. Richardson, Emma finally managed to say, Why are you doing all of this for us? Harold smiled warmly. Emma, 20 years ago, your family taught me that helping others is the most important thing we can do in life. Tonight, you're giving me the chance to live up to that lesson in the biggest way possible. Just then, the door to the pizza shop opened with a rush of cold air. A woman in scrubs hurried in, looking around frantically. When she saw Emma sitting at the table, her face lit up with relief and joy. Mom, Emma called out, standing up quickly. Sarah? Martinez was now 42 years old, with brown hair that had some gray streaks and kind eyes that looked tired from years of hard work. But when she saw Harold standing up from the table, those tired eyes filled with tears of joy. Harold, she said softly, walking toward him with her arms outstretched. Harold opened his arms and hugged Sarah warmly. Both of them cried as they embraced, overwhelmed by the emotions of being reunited after so many years. I can't believe it's really you, Sarah said through her tears. I have dreamed about this day for 20 years. So have I, Harold replied. So have I. As the three of them sat together in the small pizza shop, surrounded by the warmth and the smell of cheese and tomato sauce, they talked and laughed and cried together. Harold told Sarah about his successful business and about losing his wife. Sarah told Harold about her career as a nurse and about raising Emma to be a strong, caring young woman. Emma watched her mother and Harold reconnect, and she felt a happiness, deeper than anything she had ever experienced. In one incredible evening, she had gone from being a hungry teenager with an uncertain future to being a young woman whose dreams were all going to come true. But more than that, she had learned the most important lesson of her life. She had learned that kindness creates connections that last forever, that generosity comes back to you in ways you never expect, and that sometimes the most ordinary moments can change your life completely, as the snow continued to fall outside. Harold, Sarah, and Emma sat together like a family that had been reunited after a long separation. They had found each other again through an act of kindness, and their lives would never be the same. Harold had started the evening as a lonely old man with more money than he knew what to do with. He was ending it as a man with a purpose again. With people to care about and help, Emma had started the evening as a hungry teenager worried about her future. She was ending it with her college education paid for and a bright future ahead of her, and Sarah had started the evening working a double shift at the hospital, Worried about how to pay for her daughter's dreams, she was ending it knowing that her daughter would have every opportunity she had ever hoped for. The simple act of buying a pizza for a hungry girl had revealed a connection that spanned 20 years and had changed 3 lives forever. It was proof that kindness is never wasted, that generosity always finds its way back to you, and that sometimes the most beautiful moments in life come when you least expect them.